Now, on to other world news, and two British lawyers are calling for Saudi Arabia to be suspended from the UN Human Rights Council after investigating the arbitrary detention of activists in Saudi Arabia. They'll submit their report to the council in Geneva. It accuses the Saudi government of targeting human rights activists and political dissidents who try to exercise their right to free speech. Rodney Dixon is one of the report's authors. He hopes it will encourage countries to put pressure on Saudi Arabia to truly reform.
We were commissioned to look into exactly what has happened and present a legal report on it. And our main recommendation is that steps should be taken by the General Assembly to suspend the government of Saudi Arabia from the Human Rights Council. It being completely contradictory and ironic for a government with systemic patterns of abuse, as we've highlighted in the report, to be sitting on the council and, in fact, previously to have chaired the council. We're hoping it will galvanize many states to recognize the problem and to confront the government about the situation in their jails, and in that way put pressure on the need for real change, not supposed reform, but real change. And then what we are hoping, of course it depends on the states in the General Assembly, is that suspension will act as a major lever on the government there to clean up their act and to make a proper new start.
All right, joining us now is Ahmed Benchemsi, who is Communications and Advocacy Director for the Middle East and North Africa at Human Rights Watch. He's via Skype from New York. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Saudi Arabia, ironically, currently chairs the Human Rights Council. How likely is it that they'll be suspended? And, how's the UN General Assembly going to be handling this issue, you think?
Well, I can't speak for the UN member states. What I know is that we in Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have called for the immediate suspension of Saudi Arabia's membership rights on the UN Human Rights Council since more than a year. Actually, it dates back to June 2016 because of the atrocious human rights violations and laws of war violations that the coalition led by Saudi Arabia was committing in Yemen. This call now is for another reason, but it's also a good reason because dissent is suppressed in Saudi Arabia in a very frank and outward way. I mean, the Saudi authorities are not even hiding their motives. What's most extraordinary is that the government doesn't hide its motives. Its inclination to suppress free speech. Just look at the charges against human rights activists.
Right. Do you think that these various calls from your organizations and other human rights groups are not having an effect? I mean, do you think that this threat of suspension from the Human Rights Council might put any sort of pressure on the Saudi government?
I think the Saudi government is sensitive to its reputation across around the world. I think Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is trying to brand himself as a reformer, as someone who is inclined to change and bring about change and hope for young Saudis by taking decisions like allowing women to drive, opening cinemas, and so on. But what we say is that this cannot hide the grave situation of human rights in the country and the fact that multiple activists, at least 15, according to our counts, and maybe more now that this new report has emerged, are jailed solely for their human rights activism. And this is absolutely not acceptable. And the efforts of the Crown Prince to brand himself as a reformer cannot fly in the face of such blatant human rights violations.
Let's talk a bit more about the alleged abuses that are being committed. The two lawyers in their report say 61 people were arbitrarily detained or disappeared by the Saudi Kingdom's authorities. Are these isolated incidents? What sort of abuses are we seeing?
I cannot address the report by these two gentlemen because it has just surfaced and we didn't investigate those specific claims. What I can talk about is the background of human rights violations and the repression against human rights defenders and activists in Saudi Arabia. I can tell you it is fierce. Until today, at least 15 noted human rights activists are behind bars, including Walid Abu Khair, including Mohammed Al-Qahtani, including Raif Badawi, Zuhair Qutbi, and others. And these have been jailed only for peacefully claiming reform and human rights. I mean, again, look at the charges facing Mohammed Al-Utaibi and Abdullah Al-Atawi, who are the two latest human rights activists who were sentenced to jail, 14 years and 7 years respectively. When you look at the charges, it's incredible. I mean, they have been jailed for, quote, participation in forming an association and announcing it before acquiring the necessary license. or making international human rights organizations hostile to the kingdom by publishing on social media reports about the kingdom. These are the motives for which people are jailed during 14 years and 7 years respectively in Saudi Arabia. This is really serious.
Ahmed Benchemsi, a question here from one of our viewers. Do you think the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia right now is worse under this new crown prince, or is it improving a little bit under the new crown prince?
It is definitely not improving. Many people are jailed for their peaceful activism. What is happening in Yemen is absolutely atrocious. I mean, millions of people on the verge of famine, the worst humanitarian crisis ever, because of a blockade and a war effort that violates all the or many of the laws of war, and this is all under the guidance of this same crown prince who brands himself as a reformer. So no, we can definitely not say that the situation is getting better.
Thank you very much for speaking to us, Ahmed Benchemsi of Human Rights Watch, joining us from New York. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.